I, Sarah, 26 years old, sat frozen at our family Christmas dinner table. The tree twinkled in the corner, holiday music played softly, and Mom's special ham sat half-carved. Dad suddenly stood up, glass in hand. Everyone expected a toast, but instead, he pointed directly at me. "You're a leech," he announced to the entire family. "You can't stay here anymore." The silence was deafening. My heart shattered as everyone stared. In that moment of absolute humiliation, something hardened inside me. He would regret those words. Before I share what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to follow my journey from being thrown out at Christmas to finally getting the justice I never expected. I graduated college during the worst economic recession in decades. Despite my marketing degree from a good state university, finding a job in my field seemed impossible. Every application disappeared into the void. After 3 months of desperate searching while my student loan grace period ticked away, I reluctantly asked my parents if I could move back home, just temporarily, until I found proper employment. Dad owned a successful commercial insurance brokerage that he'd built from scratch over 20 years. Our family enjoyed a comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle in a suburban neighborhood with good schools and manicured lawns. We weren't wealthy, but we never worried about money. Dad paid for my college education without loans, something he reminded me of constantly after I moved back home. "Your education wasn't cheap," became his favorite phrase whenever I failed to secure a marketing position. Initially, both my parents seemed supportive. Mom helped me set up my old bedroom, and Dad assured me, "Take your time finding the right fit. You don't want to jump into something that won't advance your career." But as weeks turned into months, I noticed subtle changes in his attitude. It started with small comments over dinner. "Still no callbacks today?" he'd ask, a slight edge in his voice. To contribute something while continuing my job search, I took a position at Riverside Coffee, a local cafe 15 minutes from home. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but it gave me structure and a small income. I offered $400 monthly for rent and groceries, but Dad waved it away. "Keep it for your loans," he said. "Just focus on finding a real job." By month 4, his supportive facade began cracking. He'd make pointed comments about young people lacking work ethic, while looking directly at me. If I was home when he arrived from work, he'd ask why I wasn't out pounding the pavement. If I was at the coffee shop, he'd later comment that I was settling for mediocrity. My brother Jake, 2 years older and working for a construction company, visited every Sunday for dinner. I noticed how he and Dad would exchange glances whenever my job search came up. Jake had skipped college, a decision Dad never fully accepted despite Jake's steady employment. While Dad had readily paid my tuition, he had refused to invest in Jake's idea for a landscape design business 3 years earlier. "You need to prove yourself first," Dad had told him. "I'm not throwing good money after bad ideas." 8 months into my stay, I accidentally overheard Jake and Dad talking in the garage one Sunday evening. "She's taking advantage of you," Jake said. "Sarah's always been the princess. Now she's comfortable making coffee and living rent-free while I busted my ass without a degree." "You think I don't see it?" Dad replied. "Your sister needs to learn the real world doesn't coddle you." Their conversation explained the increasing tension at home. Jake had been poisoning Dad's perception of me, channeling his own resentment over Dad's differential treatment between us. The betrayal stung deeply, my own brother undermining me to our father. Despite the deteriorating atmosphere, I tried demonstrating my gratitude. I took over all the household cleaning, cooked dinner 3 nights a week, and handled grocery shopping. Mom noticed my efforts, but remained passively silent whenever Dad made his cutting remarks. Her conflict avoidance had been a hallmark of my childhood, but now it felt like another betrayal. The contradictions in Dad's behavior confused and frustrated me. He refused my offered rent money, then complained to relatives that I lived free. He criticized my coffee shop job, but also any time I took off for interviews. When I used my car, he commented on the gas I couldn't afford. When I stayed home to save gas, I was not networking enough. By November, I'd had several promising interviews with marketing firms that seemed impressed by the portfolio I'd built through freelance projects and volunteer work for local businesses. One company in particular, New Horizon Marketing, indicated they would have an entry-level position opening in January. For the first time, I felt hopeful about moving out by February. I shared this news at dinner, but Dad merely grunted, "I'll believe it when I see it." Mom changed the subject. Christmas arrived with a house full of extended family, my Aunt Melissa, Mom's sister, her husband Uncle Rob, and their college-age twins Emily and Tyler. Dad's brother Uncle Steve came with his new wife Brenda and her teenage son from a previous marriage. The tension in the house had been building for days as Dad complained about the expense of hosting, directing pointed glances my way as if I were personally responsible for the holiday's cost. I spent hours helping Mom prepare the perfect Christmas dinner, hoping the special occasion might soften Dad's attitude. I even used my coffee shop employee discount to buy him an expensive blend of his favorite dark roast beans as a gift, packaged with a heartfelt card thanking him for his support. That morning, he had opened it, nodded curtly, and set it aside without comment. Now, sitting around the table laden with holiday dishes, I watched as Aunt Melissa cast sympathetic glances my way whenever Dad spoke. She had witnessed his increasingly cold behavior toward me and had privately asked if everything was okay. I'd minimized the situation, embarrassed to admit how bad things had become. My cousins noticed too. Tyler seemed uncomfortable, while Emily tried engaging me in conversation whenever Dad cut me off. Uncle Steve remained oblivious, while his wife Brenda occasionally smirked during Dad's thinly veiled digs about adults who refused to grow up. I had just passed the mashed potatoes to Jake when Dad stood up, glass in hand, his face flushed from his third whiskey of the evening. I expected the annual Christmas toast, a tradition in our family since childhood. Instead, he pointed at me and shattered my world with those cruel words in front of everyone I loved. The dining room fell into shocked silence after Dad's announcement. I sat paralyzed, my fork halfway to my mouth, unable to process what had just happened. Aunt Melissa gasped audibly. Uncle Rob stared at his plate. My cousins exchanged uncomfortable glances while Jake examined his fingernails with sudden interest. Mom broke the silence with a nervous laugh. "John, this isn't the time for—" "There's never a good time," Dad interrupted, still standing. "But I'm done watching her take advantage of our generosity. She's had 8 months to get her act together." Hot tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of everyone. I carefully placed my napkin beside my half-eaten dinner, stood up, and walked out without a word. No one followed me. In my bedroom, the childhood sanctuary now turned prison, I collapsed onto my bed. The humiliation crushed my chest until I could barely breathe. Through the floor, I could hear the awkward conversation resuming downstairs, the clinking of silverware continuing as if my world hadn't just imploded. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes of tears before switching to autopilot. I pulled my largest suitcase from the closet and began filling it with essentials, clothes, toiletries, important documents. My hands shook so badly I dropped my hairbrush 3 times before managing to pack it. A soft knock interrupted my frantic packing. Mom entered without waiting for a response, her face pale and eyes avoiding mine. "He didn't mean it like that," she said, twisting her wedding ring. "He's just frustrated. You know how he gets during the holidays." "He seemed pretty clear to me," I replied, continuing to pack. "Where will you go?" she asked, making no move to stop me. "Does it matter to anyone here?" Mom sighed. "You're overreacting. Just come back downstairs, finish dinner. We can discuss this tomorrow when he's calmed down." After he humiliated me in front of the entire family? No thanks. Heavy footsteps in the hallway announced Dad's arrival. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "This has been coming for months," he said flatly. "You've had plenty of warning." "Warning? You never once said you wanted me to leave." It was implied. A normal adult would have taken the hint. Jake appeared behind him, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "About time, if you ask me. Some of us had to grow up without handouts." The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not one of them offered a solution, suggested another place I could stay, or even acknowledged the cruelty of throwing me out on Christmas Day with no notice. I zipped my suitcase closed with finality. I'll come back for the rest of my things when you're at work. Dad shrugged. Whatever's not gone by New Year's goes to Goodwill. I brushed past them, lugging my suitcase down the stairs. The dining room fell silent again as I passed. Only Aunt Melissa half rose from her chair, concern etched on her face, but Uncle Rob placed a restraining hand on her arm. The winter air bit through my thin sweater as I loaded my suitcase into my 10-year-old Honda Civic, a high school graduation gift that had seen better days. I had no destination, no plan. With only $267 in my checking account and payday a week away, my options were severely limited. I drove aimlessly for an hour, eventually parking in the far corner of a Walmart parking lot where other vehicles suggested people living temporarily in their cars. The irony wasn't lost on me, spending Christmas night homeless after a lifetime of comfortable middle-class security. The temperature dropped to near freezing, forcing me to run the engine periodically for heat, carefully conserving my quarter tank of gas. I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, covering myself with the only blanket I'd had the presence of mind to grab, a thin throw from the foot of my bed. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the cold, passing cars, and waves of disbelief about my situation. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from friends responding to my vague family emergency messages, offering Christmas wishes without knowing my circumstances. At 2:18 a.m., a text from Aunt Melissa lit up my phone. "Where are you? Are you safe?" John was completely out of line. "You can stay with us temporarily if you need to." Her offer brought fresh tears. At least someone in my family hadn't completely abandoned me. I thanked her but didn't immediately accept, needing time to process my options. Christmas morning found me at a 24-hour diner, nursing the cheapest coffee on the menu while families in holiday sweaters filtered in for breakfast, their happy chatter a stark contrast to my situation. I watched children excitedly describe their presents while I calculated how many days I could survive on my meager savings. I checked into a budget motel that afternoon, using my emergency credit card with its $500 limit. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and cigarettes despite the no smoking sign, but it had a bed, a shower, and heating. I made a comprehensive list of everything I'd left behind at my parents' house, prioritizing what I absolutely needed to retrieve. While creating this inventory, I suddenly remembered my bank account. I'd opened it during high school, and, because I was a minor, Dad had been added as a joint account holder. After turning 18, I never changed the arrangement since it allowed my parents to deposit money during college emergencies. A sick feeling prompted me to check my balance. Instead of $267, the account showed $4.27. My hands shook as I reviewed the transaction history. Yesterday evening, while I was packing, a $3,200 withdrawal had been made, nearly everything I'd saved from my coffee shop job over the past 8 months. A text from Dad arrived as if on cue. "Consider it back rent. Merry Christmas." I called the bank immediately, my voice breaking as I explained the situation to the customer service representative. After reviewing the account details, her response crushed my last hope. "I'm sorry, but as a joint account holder, your father has legal access to all funds. There's nothing we can do unless you want to file charges for theft, but given the account structure, it wouldn't be considered theft under the law." I thanked her numbly and ended the call. In one day, I'd lost my home, most of my possessions, my savings, and any remaining illusion that my family would protect me when I needed them most. Something shifted inside me as I sat on that stained motel bedspread. The shock and hurt began crystallizing into something harder, more focused. I'd been naive, trusting people who'd proven they didn't deserve that trust. I wouldn't make that mistake again. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled "Starting Over." The first entry read, December 25th, Day 1. This isn't the end of my story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. After 3 nights in the motel, my emergency credit card nearing its limit, I finally accepted Aunt Melissa's offer. She and Uncle Rob lived 40 minutes from my parents in a modest 3-bedroom home, with my cousins home from college for winter break. They cleared out their home office to create a temporary bedroom for me. "You can stay through January," Aunt Melissa said as she helped me make up the pull-out sofa. By then the twins will be back at school, and you can use Emily's room until you find your own place. I don't want to impose, I began, but she cut me off. You're not imposing. Family helps family through hard times. She hesitated, then added, not everyone agrees with how John handled this. Over the next few days, I learned the family was indeed divided. Uncle Steve had sided with Dad, calling me later to suggest I swallow my pride and apologize. Grandma Ruth, Dad's mother, left a voicemail expressing disappointment in my lack of gratitude. Meanwhile, Mom's parents sent a check for $500 with a note saying, to help you get back on your feet. Your mother doesn't know. The most surprising revelation came during a late-night conversation with Aunt Melissa in her kitchen. Unable to sleep, I'd come down for tea and found her working on her laptop. Your father wasn't always successful, you know, she said, closing her computer. After he and your mom married, they lived in his parents' basement for nearly 2 years. Your grandparents supported them while John tried to get his insurance business off the ground. The information stunned me. Dad never mentioned that. He wouldn't. John rewrote his history once he became successful. He doesn't like remembering when he needed help. She stirred honey into her tea. The irony is, he received far more support than he's given you, and for much longer. This new context helped me understand Dad's hypocrisy, but didn't excuse it. If anything, it made his treatment of me even more bewildering. My cousin Emily became an unexpected source of emotional support. Home from her 3rd year of psychology studies, she helped me process my feelings of betrayal. What they did was financial abuse, she said bluntly. Taking your savings, throwing you out without notice, these are control tactics. She encouraged me to document everything, every text, email, and conversation, creating a record of what had happened. Not necessarily for legal reasons, she explained, but for your own clarity. Gaslighting works by making you doubt your memories and experiences. I followed her advice, creating detailed timelines and saving screenshots of all communications. This systematic approach helped transform my emotional chaos into something I could analyze objectively. Meanwhile, I intensified my job search, applying to every marketing position within a 50-mile radius. I continued working at Riverside Coffee, picking up extra shifts to rebuild my savings. The manager, sympathetic to my situation, adjusted my schedule to accommodate interviews. After opening a new account at a different bank, I began tracking every penny spent and earned. The routine of work, applications, and interviews established a rhythm that kept me moving forward despite the emotional turmoil. 2 weeks after Christmas, I received an unexpected message from Mr. Donovan, Dad's business partner of 15 years. He asked to meet for coffee to discuss a private matter. Curious but cautious, I suggested a cafe across town where I was unlikely to encounter anyone who knew my father. Mr. Donovan arrived punctually, his usually confident demeanor subdued. I heard about what happened, he said after ordering. John's version, anyway. I wanted to hear yours. I gave him the unvarnished truth, including Jake's role and Dad taking my savings. His expression darkened as I spoke. That doesn't sound like the business partner I thought I knew, he said finally. But it does explain some recent concerns I've had. Over the next hour, Mr. Donovan revealed troubling patterns in Dad's business practices. Small discrepancies in accounting, client complaints being dismissed, risky investments made without proper consultation. Nothing definitively illegal, but enough to raise ethical questions. I'm not telling you this to add to your burden, he clarified. But you should know what kind of man your father truly is. The persona he presents and reality don't always align. This information presented a moral dilemma. Part of me wanted to use what I'd learned to expose Dad's hypocrisy, but another part questioned whether that would make me as manipulative as him. I thanked Mr. Donovan for his honesty, but made no commitments about how I might use the information. He seemed to understand, leaving me with his personal number, just in case. Back at Aunt Melissa's, I began a meticulous accounting of my contributions to my parents' household. I gathered receipts from grocery purchases, calculated the market value of the housework I'd performed, and estimated the bills for my personal usage of utilities. The final tally surprised even me. Over 8 months, I had contributed goods and services worth approximately $7,240 to the household, significantly more than the back rent Dad had taken from my account. Parallel to this financial accounting, I researched tenant rights in our state. Even without a formal rental agreement, I discovered I legally qualified as a tenant after establishing residency for more than 30 days. Dad's Christmas eviction, by law, was illegal. Proper notice was required regardless of family relationships. A free consultation with a legal aid attorney confirmed my findings. You have grounds for action, the attorney explained, but family lawsuits are complicated. They drain resources and emotions, often with little practical benefit. She advised documenting everything but suggested seeking resolution outside the courts if possible. Sometimes, she added, living well is the best revenge. That phrase resonated with me. I didn't want mere vengeance. I wanted justice and the restoration of my dignity. More importantly, I wanted independence, to build a life where no one could arbitrarily pull the foundation out from under me again. With this clarity, I developed a multi-phase plan. Phase 1 focused on immediate stability, secure housing, stable income, and financial independence. Phase 2 would address the injustice I'd experienced, not through direct confrontation, but by systematically demonstrating my father's hypocrisy to those whose opinions he valued most, his clients and business associates. The plan wasn't about destruction. It was about truth. If Dad's carefully constructed image couldn't withstand the reality of his actions, that was his problem, not mine. January brought a breakthrough. New Horizon Marketing called with a job offer for an entry-level position in their digital marketing department. The salary wasn't impressive, but it included health benefits and, most importantly, was in my field. I accepted immediately. With steady income now guaranteed, I found a small one-bedroom apartment within my budget. The building was older and the neighborhood not as nice as my parents' suburb, but it represented something priceless: independence. Aunt Melissa helped with the security deposit, insisting it was a gift, not a loan. Consider it an investment in your future, she said. Just promise to help someone else someday when you're back on your feet. By early February, I was settled in my new place, working both jobs temporarily to build a financial cushion. I kept meticulous track of my budget, determined never to be financially vulnerable again. The coffee shop manager agreed to keep me on weekend shifts, which, combined with my marketing salary, allowed me to begin rebuilding my savings. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with my immediate family. Mom texted occasionally with awkward attempts at reconciliation, always careful to avoid directly acknowledging Dad's behavior. Jake remained silent. Dad's only communication was a terse email listing times I could collect my remaining belongings while they were out of the house. I focused instead on establishing myself professionally at New Horizon. My supervisor, Denise, recognized my dedication and began assigning me increasingly substantial projects. By March, I had managed several successful social media campaigns for local businesses, building a portfolio of legitimate work. Then came an unexpected opportunity. Mr. Donovan contacted me about his company's annual client appreciation event in April, a formal dinner where Dad's insurance brokerage thanked their top clients. As a founding partner, Mr. Donovan had significant input on the guest list. We're inviting representatives from client companies and key business associates, he explained. I could include you as my personal guest without specifying your connection to John. The invitation represented the perfect opportunity to implement Phase 2 of my plan. I accepted graciously, requesting that Mr. Donovan not mention my attendance beforehand. For the next 3 weeks, I prepared meticulously. I invested in an elegant but conservative black dress that projected professional confidence. I researched Dad's top clients, memorizing key information about their businesses and representatives. I practiced introducing myself with poised detachment when the inevitable connection to Dad would emerge. The evening of the event, I arrived at the upscale hotel venue 15 minutes after the cocktail hour began. Mr. Donovan met me in the lobby, a conspiratorial smile playing at his lips. John's at the bar with the Westbrook Insurance Group, he murmured. He hasn't noticed you yet. I took a deep breath and entered the ballroom, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. I recognized many faces from company events I'd attended during high school and college before Dad decided I was a leech. Several clients greeted me with vague recognition, which I used as openings for conversation. To Mrs. Hendricks from Lakeside Properties, yes, we met at last year's golf tournament. I've just started at New Horizon Marketing. They handle digital strategies for businesses in specialized markets. To Mr. Bowen from Regional Healthcare, my father, and I haven't spoken much since Christmas. Family dynamics can be complicated, can't they? How's your daughter enjoying Northwestern? Each conversation layered subtle information without direct accusations. I was professional, successful, and independent, a stark contrast to the entitled Leech Dad had portrayed to family. I was chatting with the CFO of a manufacturing company when Dad finally spotted me across the room. His double take would have been comical under different circumstances. He excused himself from his group and made a beeline toward me, his expression a mixture of shock and barely contained anger. Before he reached us, I smoothly introduced myself to the CFO. I'm Sarah Thompson, John's daughter. It's a pleasure to meet you professionally. I've just joined New Horizon Marketing after completing my degree last year. Dad arrived as the CFO was expressing interest in New Horizon services. I turned to acknowledge him with practiced calm. Dad, good to see you. Mr. Ellis and I were just discussing how digital marketing strategies can complement traditional business models. His jaw tightened at my composure. Sarah, I didn't know you were attending. Mr. Donovan kindly invited me. He's been very supportive during my transition to independent living. The emphasis on independent wasn't lost on Dad or the CFO, who looked between us with newfound interest. Your daughter is quite impressive, John Ellis said. You must be proud of how quickly she's established herself. Dad's smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, Sarah has always been determined. The conversation continued awkwardly until I excused myself, leaving Dad to manage whatever explanation he might offer for the obvious tension. Throughout dinner, I maintained a strategic position visible to Dad while engaging warmly with everyone at my table. During the dessert course, Jake unexpectedly appeared at my elbow. Unlike Dad, he made no attempt to hide his anger. What the hell are you doing here? He hissed, loud enough that nearby conversations paused. I maintained my composure. Networking, Jake. That's how careers are built. You're trying to embarrass Dad. Dad embarrassed himself when he threw me out at Christmas dinner and stole my savings. I replied evenly. I'm just living my life. Jake's face flushed. You always have to be the victim, don't you? Poor Sarah, everyone's against her. Several heads turned our way, including representatives from two of Dad's biggest clients. I kept my voice calm. I'm not a victim, Jake. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. Jake grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. You need to leave. Now. Mr. Donovan appeared beside us, his expression stern. Is there a problem here, Jake? Jake released me immediately, suddenly aware of the attention they'd attracted. Family matter, Richard. Nothing important. It seems important enough that you're causing a scene at a client event, Mr. Donovan observed. Perhaps you should step outside to cool off. Red-faced, Jake retreated. Mr. Donovan turned to the watching clients with a practiced chuckle. Siblings, right? Never outgrow those rivalries. The moment passed, but the damage was done. I noticed clients watching Dad with new speculation, connecting his son's inappropriate behavior with whispers of family drama. As the evening wound down, I made a point of exchanging business cards with 3 of Dad's most significant clients, including Mr. Ellis. My job title at New Horizon gave me legitimate reason to connect with them professionally, while the evening's tension raised questions about Dad that I had carefully avoided answering directly. Dad cornered me as I retrieved my coat. What do you think you're doing? He demanded, keeping his voice low. Building my future, I replied. Isn't that what you told me to do when you threw me out at Christmas? You're deliberately undermining me with my clients. I haven't said a single negative word about you to anyone, I pointed out truthfully. If your relationships are damaged by my mere presence, perhaps you should examine why. I left him standing there, walking out with my head held high. In my car, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The evening had gone better than I'd anticipated. Without making any accusations or causing any scenes, I had planted seeds of doubt about Dad's character among the people whose opinions he valued most. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "What do you think you're doing?" I smiled as I typed my reply, "Building my future, like you told me to." Later that night, Mom called, her voice tight with anxiety. "Your father is very upset. Why are you trying to hurt the family this way?" "I'm not hurting anyone, Mom. I attended a business event as an invited guest and behaved professionally. Jake was the one who caused a scene." "You know what I mean, Sarah. These people are your father's livelihood. And my livelihood is my responsibility now, remember? Isn't that what Dad made very clear at Christmas?" Her silence acknowledged the trap of their own making. They had forced independence upon me, then resented when I actually became independent. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized phase 2 of my plan had been more effective than I'd dared hope. The best revenge wasn't loud or destructive. It was simply allowing the truth to be seen. The weeks following the client event brought unexpected momentum. At New Horizon, Denise assigned me to lead a small project for a local credit union, impressed by my previous work. I threw myself into the opportunity, determined to prove my professional worth. Meanwhile, I analyzed what I'd learned about Dad's business vulnerabilities from conversations at the event. Several clients had mentioned frustrations with outdated communication systems and insufficient digital presence, exactly the services New Horizons specialized in improving. Without directly targeting Dad's clients, I developed a strategic outreach plan focusing on businesses in the insurance industry. This legitimate professional approach allowed me to contact several of Dad's clients without appearing to specifically pursue them. Within 2 weeks, 3 companies, including Mr. Ellis's manufacturing firm, requested meetings with New Horizon to discuss potential marketing services. Each expressed interest in modernizing their customer communication systems after receiving my carefully crafted proposal emails. I didn't hide these developments from Denise. These contacts came from networking at an industry event, I explained truthfully. One happens to be a client of my father's insurance firm, but there's no conflict of interest in what we're offering. Denise was delighted by the potential new accounts. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we look for. Keep it up, and you'll be moving up quickly here." I scheduled the client meetings for the following week, preparing comprehensive presentations tailored to each company's needs. The night before the first meeting, Dad called. The first direct call since Christmas. "Cancel those meetings," he demanded without preamble. "Hello to you too, Dad. Don't play games. I know you've contacted Westbrook Manufacturing, Central Valley Distributors, and Ellis Corporation. They're my clients. Their businesses making independent decisions about their marketing needs," I countered. "Something your company doesn't provide. This is a deliberate attack on my business," he growled. "I've supported you your entire life, and this is how you repay me." The audacity of his statement after everything that had happened left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, I hit record on my phone before responding. "Supported me? You threw me out at Christmas dinner without notice, took my savings, and called me a leech in front of our entire family. Now you're angry that I'm successfully employed and doing my job. You're only pursuing my clients because you want revenge. I'm pursuing businesses that need marketing services. If you're worried about losing clients, perhaps you should examine why they're interested in what New Horizon offers." His voice dropped to a threatening tone. "If you don't back off, I'll make sure New Horizon understands exactly what kind of person they've hired. How do you think they'll feel about an employee who uses their position to pursue personal vendettas? Are you threatening my job because I'm good at it?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I'm warning you as your father. Drop this or face the consequences." After he hung up, I saved the recording and forwarded it to my personal email for safekeeping. Dad's threat represented an escalation I hadn't anticipated so quickly, but it also revealed his fear. He recognized that I had found legitimate leverage. The next morning, Jake appeared at my apartment as I was leaving for work. How he'd found my address, I wasn't sure, likely through Mom. "We need to talk," he said, blocking my way to the stairwell. "I'm going to be late for work. This will only take a minute." His tone was less hostile than during our last encounter. Dad's freaking out about these client meetings. That's not my problem, Jake. Look, I get that you're angry about Christmas. It was handled badly. But targeting Dad's business is going too far. I studied my brother's face, seeing something I hadn't noticed before. Genuine worry rather than just anger. I'm not targeting his business. I'm doing my job. Can't you do your job with other companies? There are plenty of businesses in this city. Why should I limit my career opportunities because Dad feels threatened? He didn't consider my welfare when he threw me out without notice and took my savings. Jake looked away. Yeah, that was pretty harsh. But Dad's under a lot of pressure you don't know about. Enlighten me. He hesitated, then sighed. Business hasn't been great lately. Some investments didn't pan out. Dad's been covering it up, but things are tight. This aligned with what Mr. Donovan had hinted at, but hearing it from Jake added a new dimension. That doesn't justify how he treated me. No, it doesn't, Jake admitted, surprising me. But losing those clients could seriously damage the company. People could lose jobs, including Dad's employees who had nothing to do with any of this. His appeal to innocent bystanders struck a chord. I hadn't considered the broader implications for people uninvolved in our family drama. Before I could respond, Jake continued, "There's something else you should know. Remember when Dad refused to invest in my landscaping business idea?" I nodded. He actually did fund it secretly. Gave me $25,000 to start up. I blew through it in 6 months with nothing to show. Jake's admission clearly cost him. Then he funded a second attempt. That failed too. He's never thrown that in my face, not once. The revelation stunned me. All this time, I'd believed Jake's resentment stemmed from Dad favoring me financially, when the opposite was true. Dad had given Jake multiple chances while holding me to an impossible standard of immediate success. Why are you telling me this now? Because I was jealous, Jake said simply. You got the college education I was too impatient for. You got praise for your grades while I got lectures about responsibility. When you moved back home, I saw a chance to, I don't know, level the playing field. By convincing Dad I was taking advantage of him. Jake had the decency to look ashamed. It wasn't my finest moment. This conversation complicated my narrative significantly. Jake wasn't just Dad's accomplice, but had his own complex motivations. It didn't excuse his behavior, but added nuance I hadn't considered. I need to get to work, I said finally. The meetings are happening, Jake. But I'll think about what you've said. At New Horizon that morning, I found Denise waiting at my desk, her expression serious. We need to talk in my office. My stomach dropped. Had Dad already made good on his threat? In her office, Denise closed the door. I received a concerning call this morning from someone claiming to be a former employer of yours. They suggested you falsified your qualifications and were using company resources for a personal vendetta. That's completely false, I said, maintaining composure despite my racing heart. I suspect it was my father. We're having a family disagreement, and he's attempting to interfere with my employment. Denise's expression softened slightly. I thought it might be something like that. The caller refused to leave a name, which seemed suspicious. I offered to show her my complete employment history and references. I've been completely transparent about my background and experience. As for the upcoming client meetings, they're legitimate business opportunities one developed through networking. I believe you, Denise said after reviewing my documentation. But I need to be sure there's no potential liability for New Horizon. Family conflicts can get messy. I understand. I can recuse myself from these particular accounts if you prefer. She considered this. Not necessary yet. But document everything and keep me informed if there are further developments. New Horizon doesn't want to be caught in the middle of a family dispute. The incident was a warning shot. Dad was willing to attack my professional reputation rather than address his own behavior. It reinforced the importance of maintaining impeccable conduct and documentation. Despite the attempted sabotage, the client meetings proceeded successfully. All 3 companies expressed interest in New Horizon's proposals, with Mr. Ellis's firm requesting a follow-up presentation to their executive team. I kept each interaction strictly professional, never mentioning my connection to Dad's company unless directly asked. As April turned to May, I noticed Mom's texts becoming increasingly concerned about Dad's health. Your father isn't sleeping well, she wrote. His blood pressure is up. The doctor is concerned. I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly followed by frustration at the implicit attempt to make me responsible for Dad's well-being after he had shown so little concern for mine. Still, I didn't want actual harm to come to him. My goal was justice and independence, not destruction. This moral quandary prompted me to meet with Aunt Melissa, who had remained a steady support. Am I taking this too far? I asked after explaining the situation. She considered carefully before answering. Only you can answer that, Sarah. Ask yourself, what's your end goal? Punishment? Vindication? Or healing and moving forward? Her question forced me to examine my true motivations. Was I seeking justice, or had I begun pursuing revenge for its own sake? I think I need to offer them a way to resolve this, I said finally. A family meeting with clear conditions, acknowledgement of what happened, a genuine apology, and returning what was taken from me. Aunt Melissa nodded approvingly. That shows maturity. Set boundaries, but leave room for reconciliation if they're willing to take responsibility. I drafted an email proposing a family meeting with a neutral mediator present, perhaps Aunt Melissa or Uncle Rob. I specified that the purpose would be to address what happened at Christmas and its aftermath, with the goal of finding a path forward that respected everyone's dignity. Dad's response came the next day, not an email, but a certified letter. Inside was a formal cease and desist notice from his company's lawyer, alleging tortious interference with business relationships and defamation of character. The letter demanded I terminate all contact with his clients and refrain from making any statements about him or his business. The legal intimidation tactic showed how far Dad was willing to go rather than simply acknowledge his wrongdoing. More disturbing was a paragraph claiming I had stolen company information during my residence at his home and embezzled funds from my previous employer. These fabrications were clearly designed to frighten me, but they revealed Dad's desperation. He was now inventing accusations rather than addressing reality. That evening, I received a call from my former manager at Riverside Coffee. Sarah, something weird happened today. A man came in asking questions about whether any money went missing during your employment here. I told him absolutely not. You were one of our most reliable employees. Dad was actually investigating me, trying to find evidence for his false claims. This crossed a line from family conflict into potentially criminal defamation. I consulted with the legal aid attorney again, who reviewed the cease and desist letter. This is mostly bluster, she said. They have no case for tortious interference if you're legitimately performing your job duties. As for the defamation and theft claims, those could actually constitute defamation against you if he's making these statements to third parties without evidence. She advised documenting every instance of Dad's interference and false claims, but continuing to focus on my professional advancement rather than engaging directly with his tactics. The best response to this letter is no response, she concluded. Continue your legitimate business activities, maintain professionalism, and let him escalate if he chooses. The more extreme his actions, the weaker his position becomes. As I drove home from the consultation, my resolve hardened. Dad's escalation confirmed that reconciliation was impossible until he faced meaningful consequences for his actions. My original plan had been more effective than I realized, and now it was time to let it play out to its natural conclusion. In late May, New Horizon entered a competitive bidding process for a major marketing contract with a regional insurance consortium. The potential client represented a significant opportunity for our small agency, a year-long contract worth nearly $200,000. I worked alongside Denise and our creative director to develop a comprehensive proposal, unaware of the connection about to be revealed. Only during our preliminary research did I discover that Midwest Insurance Group, Dad's largest client, was a founding member of the consortium. Ethically, I immediately disclosed this potential conflict to Denise. My father's company has a business relationship with one of the consortium members. I wanted you to be aware before we proceed. Is there any reason this would affect your ability to work on the proposal? She asked. None whatsoever. I've had no access to any confidential information about their marketing needs or strategies. Denise considered this. I appreciate your transparency. Let's continue as planned, but I'll take the lead during the presentation to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Our team worked tirelessly for 2 weeks, developing an innovative digital strategy that addressed the consortium's specific challenges. When presentation day arrived, we delivered a polished pitch that impressed the selection committee. A week later, Denise called me into her office, beaming. We got it. The consortium unanimously approved our proposal. The success represented a professional milestone, validating my contributions to New Horizon. Only afterward did we learn a critical detail. Dad's company had strongly advocated for a competing agency, but had been overruled by the other consortium members who preferred our approach. That evening, Mr. Donovan called with inside information. John tried to torpedo your proposal behind the scenes. He told the consortium your agency was unreliable and lacked experience. The committee chair asked for evidence, and when John couldn't provide any, it actually strengthened their confidence in New Horizon. Dad's attempted sabotage had backfired spectacularly, damaging his own credibility within the consortium. I felt vindicated but took no pleasure in the knowledge that his behavior was self-destructive. The following day, I received an unexpected call from Mom requesting to meet privately. Not at the house, she specified. Somewhere neutral. We arranged to meet at a restaurant halfway between our homes, an Italian place we'd occasionally visited as a family during happier times. Mom arrived looking thinner than I remembered, with new worry lines around her eyes. After awkward initial pleasantries, she got to the point. Your father doesn't know I'm meeting you. Things have gotten complicated. How so? She glanced around before lowering her voice. The business is in trouble, Sarah. Serious trouble. Your father made some investment decisions that didn't work out, and now we're facing significant losses. I'm sorry to hear that, I said carefully. But I'm not sure how this involves me. The consortium contract would have helped stabilize things. When your company won it instead. She trailed off, implication clear. Mom, I disclosed my relationship to Dad's company before we even submitted our proposal. New Horizon won that contract on merit, not because of any personal connection. She nodded tiredly. I believe you. But your father sees it differently. He's convinced you're deliberately trying to destroy him. That's not my intention. I'm simply building my career after being forced to start over. Mom twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. We had to remortgage the house last month. If things don't improve, we might lose it. The revelation stunned me. My parents' house had been fully paid off for years, a point of pride Dad frequently mentioned. For them to risk it suggested financial troubles far beyond what I'd imagined. Does Dad have a plan? I asked. He says he does, but he won't share the details. He's been secretive about the business for months now. I'm worried, Sarah. I've never seen him like this. Angry, paranoid, afraid. Her vulnerability awakened complicated feelings. Despite everything, this was my mother, the woman who had nursed me through childhood illnesses, celebrated my achievements, taught me to read. Her complicity in Dad's behavior hadn't erased those memories. What do you want from me, Mom? Her eyes filled with tears. I want this conflict to end. Whatever happened at Christmas was terrible, inexcusable. But this escalation is destroying our family. Can't you just let it go? For all our sakes. The request felt like another betrayal. Once again, I was being asked to absorb the damage, to prioritize family peace over justice and my own well-being. I haven't done anything to Dad, I said evenly. I haven't spread rumors or tried to damage his business. I've simply moved forward with my life and career after he left me homeless on Christmas Day and stole my savings. I know, and it was wrong. I should have stopped him. This was the closest Mom had come to acknowledging her role. But right now, we're all suffering. Your father's health is declining. He's not sleeping, barely eating. I realized Mom genuinely didn't understand that reconciliation required accountability. In her worldview, peace meant victims silently accepting mistreatment while offenders faced no consequences. Mom, I can't just pretend nothing happened. Dad needs to acknowledge what he did and make amends. That includes returning the money he took from me. She looked down at her barely touched pasta. He doesn't have it anymore. The money went into the business trying to cover losses. This new information created an ethical dilemma. My desire for justice remained unchanged, but the context had shifted. If Dad was truly facing financial ruin, pursuing restitution might hurt my mother and others who depended on the business. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Mom reached across the table to squeeze my hand. That's all I'm asking. Just think about it. After she left, I sat alone with my conflicting emotions. The situation had become more complex than a simple narrative of betrayal and justice. Real people, including innocent employees at Dad's company, could be affected by his downfall. The next day, I contacted Mr. Donovan, seeking greater clarity about the business situation. We met at his home office, away from potential workplace observers. Your mother's concerns are valid, he confirmed after I explained our conversation. The company has been struggling for nearly a year. Your father made several high-risk investments that failed spectacularly, then tried to recover with increasingly desperate measures. Why didn't you stop him? You're a partner. Mr. Donovan sighed heavily. On paper, yes. In practice, John has been making unilateral decisions, sometimes without my knowledge until afterward. I've been trying to implement oversight measures, but it's been challenging. He hesitated before continuing. There's something else you should know. Your father has a gambling problem. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Gambling? Dad? It started small. Sports betting, poker nights. Over the past 2 years, it's escalated significantly. I believe some of the business losses are actually covering personal gambling debts. This missing puzzle piece suddenly made sense of Dad's erratic behavior, financial secrecy, and explosive Christmas ultimatum. It wasn't just about me. I had been a convenient scapegoat for problems he couldn't control or acknowledge. Does Mom know? I don't think so. John is skilled at compartmentalizing. The business difficulties provide cover for the financial strain without revealing the underlying cause. This information created an ethical dilemma. Exposing Dad's gambling would bring accountability, but might devastate Mom and destabilize the company further. Keeping the secret meant enabling his behavior and denying Mom information she deserved to make informed decisions. As I grappled with this moral complexity, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Need to talk. Important. Coffee tomorrow. Jake and I met at a neutral location, a busy coffee shop downtown. His demeanor was subdued, lacking the defensive hostility of our previous encounters. I found something you should see, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements and transaction records showing systematic transfers from the business accounts to an unnamed entity over the past 18 months. The amount started small, but increased dramatically, totaling over $180,000. Where did you get these? I asked. I've been helping with some administrative work at the office. These were misfiled. Jake looked genuinely troubled. I think Dad's in serious trouble, Sarah. This doesn't look legitimate. Have you confronted him? Jake shook his head. I tried asking general questions about the business finances. He shut me down completely, became defensive and angry. What do you want me to do with this information? I don't know, Jake admitted. But I couldn't just ignore it. Despite everything, he's still our father. This unexpected alliance with Jake represented a significant shift. His willingness to share potentially damaging information suggested he was prioritizing truth over blind loyalty. I think we need to bring Mom into this conversation, I said finally. She deserves to know what's happening. Then together we can determine how to address it. Jake nodded slowly. You're right. This affects her most directly. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about Christmas. And everything after. I let jealousy cloud my judgment. His apology, though overdue, felt sincere. We were both pawns in a game we didn't understand, I acknowledged. Dad's issues clearly go beyond either of us. We agreed to approach Mom together, presenting a united front motivated by concern rather than accusation. The conversation wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary, both for the family's well-being and for any possibility of healing the damage that had been done. As Jake and I parted, I realized my perspective had fundamentally shifted. What had begun as a quest for personal justice had evolved into something more complex, a family in crisis needing intervention rather than further conflict. Dad's behavior remained inexcusable, but the context of addiction added a dimension of illness to his actions that couldn't be ignored. My revenge plan had succeeded beyond expectations, but the victory felt hollow in light of these revelations. The path forward would require wisdom and compassion alongside the strength and independence I'd fought so hard to establish. After careful planning with Jake, we arranged to meet Dad at his office after hours when the building would be empty. We deliberately didn't mention that Mom would be joining us, concerned he might refuse to attend if he knew. Mr. Donovan agreed to be present as both a business partner and a moderating influence. I arrived first, the manila folder containing the financial records and my own documentation heavy in my hands. The office felt smaller than I remembered from childhood visits. The imposing space diminished like the man himself. Dad entered with Mr. Donovan, stopping abruptly when he saw me. "What is this, an ambush?" "It's a conversation that's long overdue," I replied evenly. When Jake arrived with Mom moments later, Dad's expression shifted from anger to something closer to fear. "You had no right to involve your mother in this." "She has every right to know what's happening," Jake countered. "This affects her future too." We moved to the conference room, tension thick as we took seats around the polished table. I began by laying out a timeline of events starting with Christmas dinner, supported by texts, emails, and financial records. I presented the facts without emotional commentary, letting the evidence speak for itself. Dad initially responded with defensive anger, but as the documentation mounted, his denials became less convincing. When I placed the bank transfers Jake had discovered on the table, he fell silent. "John," Mom said quietly, "what are these payments?" Dad's composure cracked. The confident, controlling man who had dominated our family for decades seemed to collapse inward, suddenly appearing older and diminished. "It got out of control," he admitted, voice barely audible. "It started as just poker with clients. Then sports betting. Then online gambling. I kept thinking the next win would fix everything." The confession hung in the air. Mom reached for the table edge to steady herself, her face pale with shock. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad," Mr. Donovan answered when Dad couldn't. "The business has significant debt. The house remortgage covered some immediate obligations, but there are outstanding issues." "You used my savings for gambling debts, didn't you?" I asked Dad directly. "Not for back rent, as you claimed." He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "And Christmas dinner? Was that about me at all, or were you just looking for a scapegoat because everything was falling apart?" "Both," he admitted. I was desperate, angry, looking for someone to blame. "You were an easy target." His honesty, however belated, opened space for a real conversation. For the next 3 hours, we addressed years of family dysfunction, Dad's controlling behavior, Mom's passive enabling, Jake's resentment, my own blindness to family dynamics until they turned against me. By midnight, we had outlined a path forward. Dad would enter treatment for gambling addiction and agree to financial oversight from Mr. Donovan. The company would implement stricter accounting controls and transparency measures. Most importantly, Dad would step back from operational control while focusing on recovery. For my part, I made my boundaries clear. I won't return home. The trust is too damaged. But I'm willing to work toward a healthier relationship if you commit to the treatment plan and acknowledge the harm you've caused, not just to me, but to everyone in this room. Dad looked at me directly for the first time that evening. "I'm sorry, Sarah. For Christmas, for taking your money, for trying to sabotage your career. None of it was deserved." The apology, though simple, represented a seismic shift. Dad had never admitted wrongdoing in my lifetime. It wasn't enough to heal the damage, but it was a necessary first step. As we prepared to leave, Dad asked to speak with me privately for a moment. The others stepped out, leaving us alone in the conference room. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "You're not a leech. You're stronger and more capable than I gave you credit for." "I know," I replied. "I proved that to myself, if not to you. For what it's worth, I am proud of what you've accomplished. Especially knowing you did it without any support from me." His words couldn't erase the past months of struggle, but they offered a kind of validation I hadn't realized I still wanted. "Thank you for saying that." The following months brought significant changes for everyone. Dad entered a 12-week treatment program for gambling addiction, followed by regular therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. The business implemented a financial recovery plan under Mr. Donovan's leadership, slowly stabilizing its position. Jake and I developed a cautious new relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. He enrolled in business courses at the community college, finding purpose in education he'd previously rejected. Mom struggled with the revelations about Dad's gambling, but ultimately chose to support his recovery while also developing more independence. She returned to part-time work at a local library, rediscovering interests beyond her role as wife and mother. My own life continued its upward trajectory. New Horizon promoted me to account manager after the successful consortium project, with a substantial salary increase that allowed me to build meaningful savings. I maintained appropriate professional boundaries regarding Dad's business connections, recusing myself from any potential conflicts of interest. As Christmas approached again, 1 year after the dinner that had changed everything, I made a decision. I invited my family to my apartment for a small holiday gathering. The invitation specified no gifts, just food and conversation in neutral territory. To my surprise, everyone accepted. On December 23rd, they arrived bearing dishes for our potluck dinner. The apartment I'd furnished piece by piece over the year felt like a physical manifestation of my journey to independence. Conversation was initially awkward but warmed as the evening progressed. We carefully avoided contentious topics, focusing instead on neutral ground: Jake's classes, Mom's library work, my recent promotion. Dad, 9 months sober, spoke less than usual but listened more attentively. After dinner, Dad asked to make a toast. My stomach tightened reflexively, remembering last year's devastating announcement. But his words this time were entirely different. To Sarah, he said, raising his glass of sparkling cider, who had the courage to stand her ground when I failed as a father. Your strength forced me to face truths I'd been avoiding for years. I'm still working to become the person you deserve to have as a parent, but I'm grateful for the chance to try. Tears pricked my eyes as we clinked glasses. The moment wasn't perfect. Too much had happened for fairy tale endings, but it represented something real: accountability, growth, and the possibility of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than power and dependency. Later, as they prepared to leave, Dad handed me an envelope. This doesn't make up for everything, but it's a start. Inside was a check for $3,200, the exact amount he had taken from my account last Christmas. I've been saving from my personal allowance during recovery, he explained. It mattered to me to return this specifically from my own funds, not the business. The gesture, while symbolic, acknowledged the concrete harm he had caused. I accepted it with a simple, thank you. After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment reflecting on the year's journey. I had entered it homeless, betrayed, and alone on Christmas night. Now I had a home of my own, a thriving career, and healthier relationships with my family, not because I had compromised or capitulated, but because I had refused to accept mistreatment. The revenge I had originally sought had evolved into something more valuable: accountability that created space for genuine change. By standing firm in my truth rather than accepting gaslighting and manipulation, I had forced a reckoning that ultimately benefited everyone involved. Most importantly, I had discovered my own resilience. The painful crucible of that Christmas dinner had forged me into someone stronger, more independent, and more discerning about the relationships I would accept in my life. As I placed Dad's check in my desk drawer, I realized the most significant gift of this difficult year: the knowledge that no one could ever make me feel like a leech again. I had built something no one could take away, not just financial independence, but the unshakable confidence that came from surviving betrayal and emerging stronger on the other side. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who treated you unfairly? What helped you find the strength to set boundaries while still leaving room for reconciliation? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to hear more stories of resilience and redemption. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the family we build is stronger than the family we're born into.